Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Denise Anthony, Director of the Institute for Security, Technology and Society here at Dartmouth. And I am so happy to welcome you inside on this beautiful day, but believe me, it's really worth it. This talk is sponsored by ISTS, as well as Department of Film and Media Studies, and our great thanks to Mark Williams of the Department of Film and Media Studies for really getting the ball rolling on all of this and inviting Sam here today. And also the Jones Media Center and the Dartmouth Library and Digital Archives in the Dartmouth Library are also a co-sponsor to bring this event today. And so we thank all of them. And as you know, we are here to welcome and hear from Sam Gustman of the Shoah Foundation and to welcome him back to Hanover. Sam, for some of you who don't know, is a Hanover son, welcoming back, so we're glad to have him here. Sam is the Chief Technology Officer of the Shoah Foundation, where he has been since 1994, and was responsible for, in 2006, for the movement of the foundation, the archives from Universal Studios to the University of Southern California, where they are today. Sam is also Associate Dean at the USC Libraries and holds a faculty appointment there as well. As you're going to see, if you don't already know, the just incredible accomplishment of the Shoah Foundation. So as Chief Technology Officer, Sam is responsible for the operations, preservation, and cataloging of the Institute's 8-petabyte digital library, which is not surprisingly one of the largest public video databases in the world. He also leads the USC Digital Repository, which is responsible for providing services to the USC community and also to organizations around the world to help them manage their archives. He has grants from the National Science Foundation, from many other projects that have been responsible for the incredible archiving and cataloging that is the Shoah Foundation that Sam is going to talk to us about today, and he's going to explain this, but for anyone who doesn't know what the Shoah Foundation is, the USC Shoah Foundation, the Institute for Visual History and Education, is dedicated to overcoming prejudice, intolerance, and bigotry through the educational use of the Institute's visual history testimonies. And the Institute is the custodian of the Visual History Archive, a collection of over 51,000 audiovisual testimonies from Holocaust survivors and other witnesses. So it is just a great honor and pleasure for Dartmouth to welcome Sam Gustman.
Thank you, everyone, for having me here to Dartmouth. It's been a wonderful few days meeting with all the various groups. I would like to start just by playing a video about the Shoah Foundation, its founding, after Schindler's List by Steven Spielberg, just to give some context and set the tone for the actual talk.
Why did you decide to tell us the story of your experiences?
Because every survivor has a story to tell. Some people think, well, I've heard this story before. But from every story, you learn a little bit.
I remember talking to a lot of Holocaust survivors during the production of Schindler's List.
How did you survive?
By miracle.
It was one of the first moments that made me realize that there were many, many stories that needed to be told. That's how the Shoah Foundation began.
It was a tremendous undertaking. There were thousands of people all over the world who came together to collect the 52,000 survivor testimonies.
Je mène une interview de Madame Annie Abelansky.
The location is London, England.
Henryk Mandelbaum, w języku polskim.
Malka de Hausmann. Okay.
The original collection was taken in 56 countries in 32 languages. The survivors gave us their testimony so that we would tell the world and educate future generations.
I'm at an age where I don't know how much longer I'll be here. I felt it's important that it's not forgotten.
The survivors who give us their stories trusted us to hold on to those stories and teach with them far into the future. So it's our responsibility to preserve them, to make sure that they're here now and 100 years from now.
What better place to put these testimonies than at a great research university so that scholars from all disciplines could use these materials? Things that will die on the page of a history book will come to life when you see them in the context of this archive.
This archive is based at USC, but we have many university partners around the world. We work with faculty and students in many disciplines. Students are watching testimony in their own languages, learning what it means to be human and to go through that experience and to make it part of their story in the world today.
We're going to be listening to individual stories because history happens to individuals.
2 little boys came in and they were looking at my father, just staring at him. The one said, well, we were told when you look a Jew in the eye, you can see the devil in there. He says, I just wanted to see if that's true. A little 8-year-old kid.
Genocides have not stopped since the Holocaust. It's really important to expand the archive with new content.
We're now collecting testimony from a variety of different genocides that have taken place in recent history. We really can't compare human suffering, but the causes and consequences of violent and genocidal societies we need to understand better and deeper.
All these examples of intolerance and racial hatred have to be taught, so the young people, the next generation, will never allow this to ever happen again.
Young people are forming who they want to be. They're developing their identity. They're figuring out what they think about things, how they should be behaving.
I always feel guilty, like if something happens to someone else and I just sit by and watch because I don't want to get involved. And I think it's important that you do get involved.
There will be occasions when we have to make the choice. Are we bystanders or do we act?
Our attitudes really do matter to the way in which the world works. If we can't make this work in our own backyard, we'll never make it work in the world.
When you see an injustice, stand up and speak up and take a stand.
Try to understand each other. And if you cannot love each other, at least respect each other.
We have a message. We were there. We can talk about it.
I've seen young people, young students who have seen these testimonies. It does change them. And that always gives me hope that the more we get this out into the world, thousands and someday millions of young people will be in some way changed by this. And these survivors who are now educators, they can change the world.
So again, I'm Sam Gustman. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the USC Shoah Foundation Institute. I've been working there since 1994. And in 1993, when Schindler's List first came out, Steven Spielberg started getting thousands of phone calls from survivors who wanted to tell him their story. And he decided to try and go get as many of those stories as he could. It became a $250 million project set up in 56 countries around the world, collecting at its height around 12,000 interviews per year. We ended up collecting a large number of videos. We ended up with 235,000 tapes for the 52,000 testimonies from 57 countries and 34, if not 56, 57 countries, 34 languages. We had 3,000 employees, interviewers, and videographers working around the world. We ended up with a cataloging system where we broke every video down minute by minute, so each minute was searchable like it was its own web page. So we have 7.5 million clips of video that the archive's been indexed into using 62,000 terms. When the video was actually taken, people would talk about other people in their lives, and we indexed all of them as well. We have 1.2 million people that are brought up or mentioned in the archives themselves. 46,000 locations that people talk about, and 500,000 images that they show of their family and other areas that were of importance to them. The interviews themselves are broken down into Jewish survivors. We interviewed over 49,000. Rescuer and aid providers. We interviewed Gypsy survivors, people in the military, political prisoners, and a few rare interviews we were able to get with groups like homosexual survivors to round out the archive. We've started on other genocides. So what happened was we did the collection from 1994 through 2000 of the Holocaust survivor testimonies. These are some new ones that we've started taking, and we're doing two things. We're going back and finding archives on the Rwandan genocide, Cambodian genocide, and Armenian genocide that existed, and we're bringing those in and starting to process those. But we're also starting to gather new testimonies slowly from these groups, and these were our first initial tests in these areas to bring in those testimonies. So from 94 through 2000, we did the Holocaust testimonies. We indexed them from 1998 through 2005. And then in 2006, Steven Spielberg took the Shoah Foundation, that was the nonprofit that he started, and he gave it to the University of Southern California. And when it was given to the University of Southern California, it was decided a few different things, but one of them was that they were going to expand into doing these other histories. So we've actually started on the Rwandan genocide, Cambodian genocide, Armenian. We've also started on the Sudan this year. We're going to be starting a project on collecting testimonies from Sudanese survivors, and we're starting to look at Serbo-Croatia as well. When we collected a testimony, we had a paper slate up front which introduced the survivor. They then introduced themselves, and they're also introduced by the person interviewing them. And we talked during the interview about their life before the war, during the war, and after. And then we asked them to show photos or artifacts of interest and talk about them on the video. We also then had them bring their family out. And we also did a number of interviews where they would go out to do site visits to talk about what they experienced at the actual physical locations that they were at. When the testimonies came back into the foundation, we made a number of copies of it, and then we started cataloging those interviews. By cataloging, what we did is at a top level for each interview, we put in basic information like people's date of birth, their experience, their religious affiliations. But then we also started to treat each minute of video like it was its own web page. And on each minute of video, we would put geographic locations, latitude and longitudes, types of places, dates, historic events, any people, organizations, all different kinds of elements and objects that are talked about in those videos are added to each of those minutes so that you could search to them and through many different ways. And what we also then started to do after we did the cataloging was start preserving them. So one of the other issues we started running into is that everything rots. Film, conservatively, you get 50 years, videotape 20 years, computer hard drives 5 years, LTO, data tape 3 years, DVDs 2 years before we see rot. So basically, the newer the technology, the faster we're seeing rot in it. And that's really difficult because we had taken all these videotapes in 1994 and we knew by 2014 they'd start to see age-based damage. So we started to build mass robotic systems that can process 80,000 tapes a year and take all of those videotapes, turn them into computer files, and store them in very large computer systems. But the issue we had was as soon as we started digitizing things and putting them onto computer systems, we knew those were rotting even faster than the original videotape. So we had to build two systems, one to turn everything into files, one to stop computer files from rotting. And so we do that through what we call mass migration. Once all these files are in an actual preservation system, we're able to do a fingerprint that's called a SHA-1 of each of the actual files. And so what you do is you run a file through this algorithm. It gives you a unique number. If you run that file through that algorithm again and it gives you a different number, you know one of the ones and zeros in that file have changed and that the file is starting to see damage of some kind, most likely due to age or some kind of, or it could also be a computer error. So what we do is we constantly run the files through this fingerprint. And as soon as we find a file on a tape cartridge, and we have thousands of these that are storing the digital data that has an error in it, we load its twin up because we keep 4 copies of everything. We have 2 in these large tape robots, and then we have 2 in larger disk storage, cloud storage systems, which I'll talk about in a bit. But what happens is if we discover that there's a file or a piece of video that's starting to rot, we'll load up its twin, copy over onto a brand new piece of media, the exact same content, and we'll throw away the actual data tape that's beginning to rot. What we also do is we don't trust any media more than 3 years. As soon as a piece of media in our archives hits 3 years old, we migrate off of it, check all the bits again, and we throw away the 3-year-old piece of media. So we're constantly migrating to actually preserve the files that the video are stored in and the media that they're stored on. Once we've done the cataloging and we've actually done the preservation of all the materials, we begin to provide access to them to the general public, to universities and to high schools. And we do that through various different sites. We have a generic website which has some clips. We have a YouTube channel which goes out to the general public. But we have the Visual History Archive, which Dartmouth is just about to subscribe to, which gives access to all 107,000 hours of the video, 52,000 interviews instantly online. And so that will be here hopefully within the month. And let me show you what it looks like by showing you an actual demonstration version or a public version that has access to 1,100 of the 52,000 interviews, but gives similar functionality. So this is called the Visual History Archive. And what we're doing here is we're providing actually many different searches. Search is a strange thing. The more structured a search is, the easier it is to narrow things down. But everyone loves Google, which is completely unstructured. So we offer the researchers the unstructured search down to more structured searches. So I'll start with the most unstructured search, a quick search where we could just type words in. What I'm able to do is type in the word food. And what it's doing on the left is it's going through all 52,000 interviews in all 32 languages, and it's saying, okay, as if someone's talking about food in Russian, that's a hit. If they're talking about it in Czech, that's a hit. If they're talking about it in Hebrew, that's a hit, or English. So there's 29,000 testimonies, regardless of language, where someone's talking about food. And that's what's just happened here. I'm going to search on some other. I'm going to put in hiding. So now it's searching on food and hiding. And I'll move it down to 17,000. I'm going to type in Auschwitz and try and narrow it a bit more. And then on the left, you'll see we're going down to 4,700. I'm going to click on, so there's 4,700 out of the 52,000 interviews we have that talk about these things. But I'm just going to click on the ones that we have available for this demonstration. Out of the 1,100 we have available, 208 of them meet this criteria. So I'm going to just move this to full screen so it's a little easier to see and move around in. So what I just queried on was food hiding in Auschwitz. Food, which is in blue, hiding, which is in green on my screen, yellow up here, and Auschwitz, which is in orange. And what I can do is look at something, for instance, this first interview here. And what it's telling me is that at minute 141, next to the concept of food provision, where we queried on food, at minute 141, Renata Adler is going to be talking about food there. She'll talk about it at minute 40 on food rationing. She'll talk about it in respect to ghettos at minute 84. She's going to talk about hiding people at minute 18. She'll talk about these other subcamps of Auschwitz at minute 115, 114, and 134. So if I want to watch her testimony from the beginning, I can click on her picture or her name. But if I'm interested, let's say, in hiding people, I can click here on this 18 right here. And we're going to jump to minute 18, where she talks about hiding people.
Did you ever celebrate any of the holidays, like Passover or?
Not in my house.
So sometime during that minute, she'll start talking about it, and we'll watch some more testimony in a little, but that just gives you the idea of how the search engine works and how we're able to jump around. Well, the other ways we're able to move through the archive is we can look at the keywords in alphabetical order. And we could start moving through those, sort of like the index at the back of a book, but instead of page number, we have minute numbers. So that if I'm interested in something like forced labor, I can click here, jump to minute 54, and listen to her talk about forced labor at minute 54. So we're now treating each minute of the video as its own entity with its own keywords that we're able to move to and start watching right away. And so we're now able to jump through video similar to the way that you jump through text on the web. I'm also able to look at it in ways different than just keywords. We indexed all the people. Again, we talk about 1.2 million people that are talked about in the archive, and out of the 50,000 interviews. These are all the people that this particular survivor talks about during her interview and what minute she talks about them at. If I click here, she talks about her mother.
That's a picture of my mother, Gerda Rodewald, born Schönfeld.
And actually, one of the things that the survivors did was they showed us, if they wanted to, pictures or artifacts that they were interested in, and they talked about them in the video. So we actually went in as they were talking about them in the video and took snapshots and make a slideshow. So these are some snapshots from this particular person's testimony. We just saw her mother there. And so what you can do, again, is if you find a snapshot of interest, you click there and it jumps to that moment in video where that actual snapshot's being talked about. So we index in by keywords, people's names, and images into all the video now at this particular point to be able to move through all the content. We have different kinds of searches that we enable with various structure. That was the sort of loosest one, but we can start to query based on people, for instance. So if I type my name in, Sam, we index by what we call complex objects, and I'll show you what that means in a second. So there's 8,500 people who said who had the first name Sam in the archive, and 6,400 interviews here. What I'm able to do is I'm able to highlight this first person here, and this one's interesting because it's hit on Caroline Richardson for her husband George Richardson, and you don't see the name Sam anywhere until you scroll down. We didn't just capture people's names at the time of the interview, we captured it throughout their lives. So if they were born with a different name, we capture that. If it was a woman who got married, we'd have her maiden name. In this particular case, George Richardson was actually Samuel Reich when he was born, and when he came over during the war, he changed his name to George Richardson. So the reason Sam was a hit on this particular interview was because he had changed his name. We also started to build queries around the various experiences that we'd captured. So Jewish survivors, if you're interested just in that particular area, or people in the military, you could just query on that particular area. So what I can do here is go in and start building a set of questions. Instead of having a whole form to fill out, we let you pick what parts you want to do. I'll do a very simple one here, for instance, on city of birth. I'll type in Rodham, Poland. And I'm going to pick it, and it's going to tell me that there's 222 interviews where someone says they were born in Rodham, Poland. What I can do is start to narrow that down if I want. Let's do length of interview. So out of those 222, if I'm interested, 104 are less than 2 hours. 116 are 2 to 6 hours. 2 of those 222 are 6 to 10 hours. And we don't have any of those 222 that are more than 10 hours. So as a researcher, I may be interested in the longer ones. I can click there. And I can now go look at those 2 interviews. Before I jump in, if I want to double check, I can look at the actual top level record for this interview. And I see that he was born in Rodham, Poland. And I can see that Saul Adler also, these are his experiences I'm about to hear about, what ghetto he was in, what camps he was in, whether he was in hiding, etc. We then offer even more structured searches. So we've standardized on something called Z39.19. The basic idea of it is when you make a database, any kind of database, you need what are called whole part inheritance and associative relationships to put sets of things together. So if you had the word car, the tires and engine are a part of a car. A luxury car is a kind of a car. the drivers associated with the car. We have 62,000 terms that we've tied together by their whole part, inheritance, and associative relationships. And by applying those terms to each minute of the video, it allows us to bring back sets of video and do all kinds of different intersections with them or presentations of them. So at a very basic level, this is exposing the whole part relationship. So I just opened health down to mental health, down to bystander regrets, and I'm able to see that there's 52 interviews where they talk about regrets as a bystander, and these are all the synonyms for those actual terms, and at the bottom is the definition of the use of it. I'm going to do a quick query on forced march food. And I'm going to intersect that with hunger so I get some hits. And so you'll see over here there's 23 interviews and 43 one-minute clips where these came back. What I can do now is go take a look at these testimonies. And here you'll see this gentleman, William Shapiro, talk about forced march hunger, start talking about it at minute 68, and really get into forced march food at minute 70. So I'm going to click and we'll listen for 2 or 3 minutes to this clip of testimony.
Precise number, but there are many, many men. And they march us into a, it must have been a restaurant, because it was a very large room. And I recall sitting in the back of this room. And I was in pain. And I had my head down. I gave no thought to anything else, I was just in pain. And there were more and more men being shoved into the same room. And then the next morning, as we were being marched out, I began to feel the pangs of hunger. And I was thirsty, because I really hadn't had anything to eat for 24 hours. And I was so, I began to feel those pangs. And those pangs never left me for the next 4 months. And they began to march. And we're marching along the side of the road. And the German troops, with all their cars, were in the middle, and we were in the ruts on the side of the road. And people were staggering, and I just had this terrible headache. And we were marching and walked back. I would say marching, we were really walking back. And then our hunger pains were getting worse. And the water, and nothing was available. And I think we must have walked for the whole day until we were allowed to sit down. And I don't think we got any food until the day later. And what I got was a piece of brown bread. It was not the same bread I got when I was in concentration camp, but it was hard, dark bread. And there was no water. And I remember chewing that bread as we were walking further back. And eventually, we got the first taste of the green soup. And I didn't have anything to carry my soup in. So I had to use my helmet liner for this ladle of soup they gave us. And it was ugly tasting, but it was liquid. And I remember using my helmet liner to get my soup in. And I still had some of the bread. And that's the only food that I had, the only thing I ever had.
But you get the idea. By searching on specific terms and putting them next to each other and intersecting them, you get clips of video that are more pertinent to the area that you might want to be looking at. I'm going to show you a different way of actually looking at testimony through an interface we have that's called Eyewitness. This is actually for high school students. And the whole idea behind this is that there's a new area of digital literacy. So the concept is there's a lot of structure in school for kids to learn to read from books, and there's a lot of structure in school for kids to learn to write papers. They're coming out with the standards for kids to learn to read from the internet and for kids to learn to produce to the internet. And so we've been following these digital literacy standards and intersecting it with the needs of teachers for tolerance education, bully education, to meet various curriculum standards in their states, providing user interface for them to use there, as well as folks interested in studying the Holocaust history. So what a teacher will do at a very simple level is they may just go in and look at predefined clips about specific topics.
Apparently knocked on the door and they took us in, and they were religious people. They were some sort of evangelical sect, and they took us.
I won't play this whole clip, but basically this is where she's talking about her experience as a child there and as a hidden child. So what we have is also links at the bottom to content in the U.S. Holocaust Museum's encyclopedia that talks about hidden children, so that there's more context to what they're looking at. Then we start to get a bit fancier. We give the teachers, for their students, the ability to create their own web pages and activities on for their their different curriculum. So here they're creating a teacher's created a set of pages on this particular poem and testimony around this poem. So the kids will start to answer questions, and then as they go through, they'll get more and more content that the teacher wants them to either watch or answer questions on. And when they've gone through all their content, they'll start searching for content on their own. We teach them how to use the search engines you saw before and bring their own clips of information back. And when they're finished doing that, we ask them to go to a video editor and start to build their own projects together. So I'm launching the video editor here that they get. And basically what we do is, once they've searched on certain videos, they're able to take those videos, drag them down into a timeline, and start building either through videos, music, various special effects, or adding their own video of themselves or their own audio. They're able to build up their own project. And I'll go play one that a student created in a little bit so you can see what that looks like. And once they're done with that, they'll go and they'll have Facebook-like communication with the rest of their class. So let me go show you what a 15-year-old student made. That I thought was pretty good for a 15-year-old. And these connections pop up.
When leaving comments, make sure that your words are respectful and helpful. Never use hurtful language and put downs. Your actions and words in the online world should represent the person you are in the real world. In this way, you'll be practicing good digital citizenship.
Again, for high school students, we preach to them a little bit through these clips as they start to move through the content, but it becomes more and more important as we do it. So we'll just watch a quick minute of this. This is something the 15-year-old put together.
Resistance is the attempt to withstand or oppose a force. Many people believe that resistance is through violence, but Roman Kent, a Holocaust survivor, believes differently.
Also a resistance. Resistance does not have to be.
As you can see where she's struggling putting music over the top of the survivor, etc., but she's doing her own video, uploading it, mixing it, and handing it in as her actual project.
Teaching the children in the ghetto because resistance was illegal. So that there are many other forms of resistance which is spiritual and moral.
Education in
Again, that's the aspects of digital literacy, though. They're learning how to mix together content, edit it, put it out there in a way that pushes their message. And so there's a few things that we do to help them, actually. We create what we call scaffolding, or these videos that teach students about what it is they're trying to put together. So I'll play the first minute of a video that we provide for the students called Ethical Editing. And it talks about how to edit as a good digital citizen.
To make the most of your experience with Eyewitness, it's important that you have an understanding of the basic concepts of video editing. It'll also serve as a foundation to translate that knowledge into an ethical use of those tools. In its most basic sense, editing is a process of selection, recombination, and juxtaposition. Those are the fundamental processes by which editing transforms, source video material into your own work. Selection is simply the idea that from a larger piece of source material, you are making discrete choices about which parts of that material you want to work with. The next concept is that of recombination. So that's the idea that once you've made these selections, you might choose to put them in an order that's different from the order they occurred in the original source material. You might take those pieces and put them in a different order than that in which they originally occurred. And the next important concept is that of juxtaposition. The way you understand one clip is very much dependent on what you saw before it and what you see after it. So juxtaposition is just a way of describing the decisions you're making about the relationship between different clips. The choices you make about how those different pieces fit together is really what gives them meaning. You can really make anything mean anything you want it to mean. So when you're editing, it's very important to always be respectful and conscientious of the original material. And
I'll stop there, but you get the basic idea there. I'll show you a little bit of what is search. Again, these are aimed at high school students, but it'll give you some idea of some of the other kinds of videos we put together.
Google, they bring, well, so first they have this stuff that
I think it would go to probably a satellite and then do something and then use some weird math equation or waterfall algorithm and I get the answer.
They come flying in on little envelopes all the way through and end up on my screen in the form of words.
So, what exactly happens when you hit the search button in Google? It's really quite complicated.
He doesn't know.
That might be true. It's a trade secret. There are a few things we do know, though. For example, did you know that when you click that search button, you're actually searching through over 1 trillion web pages on the internet?
Wrong. It's the indices that get searched.
Okay, so let's explain indexing. Say you were looking for a particular person in a book. Would you start flipping through all the pages of the book to find this person? What you do is go to the end of the book and look in the index to try to find your person there.
Don't make it so complicated. Spiders index the internet.
Okay, so what are spiders? Spiders are software applications that actually crawl the internet, go onto different web pages, and create these indexes. The search keywords you're looking for might exist on thousands, even millions of web pages. How does Google know what results to return to you first?
They're smarter than you.
The answer we're looking for is PageRank.
Okay, but that's just one of the ways.
So what is PageRank? PageRank is Google's formula of ranking web pages based on how many other web pages on the internet have linked to it. The higher the number of links, the higher the PageRank.
Correct.
So all these basic concepts, how to search, how to edit, how to do it ethically, these are things that aren't actually taught in school right now, and so we're having to wrap all of these up into the actual applications that we release for the tolerance education efforts that we're doing at the high school level. But that's all a part of doing the digital literacy. So again, what we're doing here at Dartmouth, though, is the Visual History Archive, which is currently available at 41,000 institutions, and it is a larger version of what I just showed you. I showed you had only 1,100 testimonies worth of video in it. This one will have 52,000, all 52,000, and you'll have researchers who will want to come to Dartmouth who to be able to get access to it. You'll have researchers at Dartmouth who will be able to create projects of testimony and be able to use them in their classrooms. And we find that there's lots of different uses of that, but basically all of these this content is going to be accessed over internet too, to a local cache here. We actually have our own caching environment that we've built. By caching, it means there will be a small percentage of the video that'll be here locally so that it absolutely positively will play in the classrooms, and professors will be able to lock that content there and guarantee that when they want to play those testimonies, it won't be interfered with by the internet or anything else, because it'll be local for those professors to use here at Dartmouth. These are the places that currently have access to the archive. Dartmouth will be right there at the end as soon as we get things up and going. Again, USC was actually the first place, and University of Michigan the second, that started using the archive. What we see when folks at the various universities start to use the archive, and there's 325 courses being taught with it at the moment, is that researchers spend about an average of 49 minutes. The top 1,000 users are spending an average of 55 minutes each time they log into it to search through and watch content. We've had 240,000 searches to date, and 35,000 of the 52,000 testimonies have been watched by researchers doing various projects. So that's about 6 or 7 years worth of material that's been watched so far. Dissertations are growing, 35 so far, and articles and books published were at 73. One of the struggles that we have is we're constantly trying to expose the content, get it out there, get people to learn from it and use it, but there's a duty of care here where the privacy of the survivors, the potential misuse, intellectual property that may exist in the content, those things pull against actual access. So we are always struggling against that, doing everything we can to get the content out there at the same time securing it. Obviously, to secure the content, you'd never show it, but that's not acceptable. But putting it out there exposes the people who give their testimony to danger, and we've had issues like that. You know, all of the genocides have their version of deniers, whether it's like with Armenia, where it's the whole country of Turkey, or it's the Holocaust with the Holocaust deniers. We get people who are rabid about it, but it's actually, if you ask the survivors about it, they're like, we survived the real thing. What are these guys going to do to us? So it's really just about the people managing it and how comfortable we are moving their material out there, and we're trying to move as much as we can in as responsible a way as possible. I'm going to change hats for a second from the Shoah Foundation over to the digital repository. Basically, one of the things USC decided was that when we brought the technology in to be able to care for the Shoah Foundation Cloud Archive, we were going to also make it available for other collections. So what we offer up as a service to institutions around the world, universities, collections, are digitization services, cataloging services, digital preservation, digital library access, and file server services. So for instance, if you've got a large collection of videotapes and you don't have the money to buy the systems to digitize them yourselves, but you want them to be academically accessed, you can come to us and we'll put them through our robotic systems and digitize them for you. We will also go through and provide cataloging of materials for people. This is sort of the cloud archiving model where we do this work for others. And so we have armies of students that will go through and catalog material as we get new collections. We also will preserve the material using the same preservation systems that are used for the Shoah Foundation. This becomes important for researchers who have things like data management plans from the National Science Foundation and NIH, where they have to show what happens to their data after their program is actually completed. So we offer 20-year models and other storage models for preservation for them, so they can actually store and say their stuff's preserved when they get their grants. We'll also provide websites. We'll do the kind of web interfaces that you saw, but for other kinds of collections. And we have everything from a group on Albanian human rights to a studio like Warner Brothers to we even have a group that has original film from the 50s of surfing around the world, and we'll make that available as well as they want it for various researchers. That's more researched, I think, in California than other places, but I don't know that for sure. We're offering file server services by bringing in cloud storage from various companies. What that means is that from Nirvanix and EMC with Isilon, we're able to offer up storage over the high-speed networks on disk that's attached to our supercomputer. We charge $70 per terabyte per month, which is what you'll find if you're actually accessing the material is much cheaper than Amazon or any of those. And then for the folks that have the grants that need to step away for 20 years need to step away from the content after a few years and show that it's being cared for any researcher in the world, we will give them a 20-year price, so they can per terabyte give $1,000 as part of their grant, and then we'll ensure that that content's there for 20 years, bid accurate through the USC libraries, and then it'll go into the USC libraries regular selection process after that. We offer many different technical protocols for accessing that. We're also able to tie into most of the commercial products out there that do archiving, such as Semantic or Commvault. So if researchers are storing or archiving their things using commercial off-the-shelves products, that will just sync right up to our cloud storage. And we're also offering Dropbox-like functionality for researchers who want to be able to look at their content on iPhones, iPads, Macs, PCs, all at the same time. For data security, if you're in the medical area, you'll recognize these things as some of the requirements for HIPAA compliance. We have HIPAA compliant storage for storing that. The SSAE 16 Type 2 certified compliance is probably the biggest area there. Happy to talk to anyone who's interested in that and how we maintain HIPAA compliance as a cloud service. Our target customers, again, for this are researchers who have grants like NIH and NSF and NEH grants. Small archives, we hear from thousands of small archives that don't have the money to preserve their own content. There's a number thrown out there. I don't know how accurate it is at all, but the Council on Research Libraries is estimating about 3% of the usable scholarly archives in the world has been digitized. So whether they're right or wrong or off by a factor of 10, we expect a tsunami wave of content to need to get digitized from all of these small collections that researchers have collected over the years around the world. Again, this example of the Albanian human rights testimonies we just got was an example. And instead of having to pay for their own architecture or figure out how to do it themselves, they can just give us the content, we'll process it, and put it at the USC libraries and make it available for researchers. We're also doing that for large archives, so like the Shoah Foundation or PBS, etc. You'd be able to come to us, and instead of building your own infrastructure, we'd process the materials and make them available through the USC libraries. And then we have commercial entities like the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences, and Warner Brothers, etc., that come to us and say, will you archive our materials? And their contents of pedagogic interest. We have a big film school. You guys have one too. And so people like to know that that stuff's being preserved and in special ways can be available for faculty and students. These are just some of the initial customers of the digital repository that we have. A lot of them are USC based. We're just starting to expand out to other universities. We'd love to have Dartmouth start talking to us, at least even about backing up things like various histories that they may have, etc. That is our cloud library for USC. And that's what I have. Are there any questions?
Who finances all this?
So USC finances it now. In the beginning, the Shoah Foundation was a large portion of it was financed by Steven Spielberg. And now we're actually in a large endowment campaign for the Shoah Foundation. For the digital repository, it's financed as the USC Libraries is. Most libraries have collections budgets. I know USC's is around 14 million. I don't know what that is at Dartmouth, but this is sort of the future of how library collections are going, not just books, but to have interesting collections that are digital and be able to curate them and supply them to faculty and researchers is becoming important. So people pay to actually use the service as well as getting it funded through grants. Yes?
How do you prepare interviewers?
How do we prepare interviewers? So we have a pretty extensive training program for interviewers. And when we were doing the mass Shoah Foundation ones, we would have them all around the world in all of the various countries that we were in. Now what we do that we're doing less in the US, we'll bring them to the Shoah Foundation. But actually what we're doing for Rwanda and Cambodia is we're partnering with nonprofits in those areas. For instance, in Rwanda, we partner with a group called Ibuka. And what we're doing is training local interviewers and videographers through Ibuka to do the Rwandan collection and testimonies and interviews.
Do you have a package?
We do. And we actually post a lot of that on our website to see how we do that.
I noticed that you signed into the eyewitness, and for an educator, does that mean that they would have to pay a certain charge to access the activities and the programs that you offer for the students?
Eyewitness is completely free. It's been funded through grants, but what we do for the logins is that a teacher comes to us, proves they're a teacher, gets a login, and then they can invite their students in so that they work in their own little sandbox. Right now I'm pretending I'm a teacher with lots of students when I log in. Yes?
With regard to digitalization preservation, are there other comparable organizations that are doing the same job?
There's a lot that are doing similar things. Preservation's a big deal. From a university perspective, I don't know. We've been wagged around at USC by the Shoah Foundation collection, so we have to eat our own cooking there. And so I haven't seen anyone do all the parts that we're doing, but I've seen a lot doing some of the parts. You'll see at University of Texas and all of the Texas schools, they got an enormous amount of funding during the Bush administration to build out a digital library for all the Texas institutions to store their stuff, and they're doing some of this. University of Illinois and also UC San Diego has got some storage systems in place, but they're not doing the 20-year bit preservation part of that right now. The other area that's doing many of these pieces is the Library of Congress. A lot of this came from the work done for the Audiovisual Conservation Center, which was a $250 million facility that Dave Packard of Hewlett-Packard funded to digitize everything that's copyrighted in the US, that's film, video, or audio. And so actually our systems are compliant with that. Since there aren't really standards in this area and there's not a lot of people doing it yet, we figured if we did what the Library of Congress did, that would be as close as we can get at the moment. Yes?
What do you do about accusations of fraud? Not by deniers, but serious people who say, no, that person wasn't there, wasn't doing that, or is making it up.
We'd let them do it. They'll make their accusations, and you know, this is memory. This is one of the actual areas where there's a lot of challenges in terms of using video and audiovisual testimony as primary sources. You know, human beings make mistakes. I have trouble remembering 10 years ago, God forbid there's a name or something I need to remember. And these people are remembering events from 50, 60 years ago. And so they get it wrong sometimes. They misremember things. And some of them, for their own personal reasons, may make certain events sound more grand or less grand than they are, but they're human beings, and that's one of the challenges of using personal memory. But that's also one of the great things about having volume, where you can have a lot of data points to look over as you're doing it, and with all the folks from the economics department and the department, you know about using data points to smooth some of that out.
So you're using students to do the cataloging. Is there in the future computer reference to do that instead of having
Yeah, we spent a lot of time, and I'm going to bring up a website. The question is do we spend a lot of time are we looking for automated systems is what you were asking, I think. And so we got an $8 million grant from the National Science Foundation to look at using speech recognition and compare it to what we were doing manually. The answer is no, and I'll now give you the long answer. Basically, there's 3 parts to being able to do recognition. There's what's called the recognition aspect. What are the actual words that are said? Then there's language processing. If 2 people say the same thing just a little bit differently, can you map to that idea correctly? So that you query on the idea once, but you get both results back. And then there's the information retrieval engines, which bring the information back once you do that. The speech recognition, when we started, was horrible. It was down around 15%, and the things that were breaking it were people, you know, if someone's not speaking their original language, if they get emotional, if they switch languages, if they're elderly, all those things tend to break speech recognition. And one of the reasons the NSF liked our data set is we had all that with the survivors. And so we were testing against that. We got up to actually 65% accuracy on the recognition, but that still wasn't enough to get the language processing where someone says something a little different than someone else to be able to work before it gets to the information retrieval engine. And so it still flatlines a bit, although we've had great success in the Czech Republic out of Charles University. We got someone to get to 85% accuracy on Czech testimonies only. We're trying to raise $12 million for them so that they can try and get their techniques working on other languages right now. But it's not there. It's in its very beginning stages. So for now, what we say is people are best at it, and we try and optimize around them. For instance, a transcript takes 12 hours for every hour of video to process. It only takes us 2 hours for every hour of video to process with the techniques that we use to get it through. So for the Shoah Foundation, it was $25 million to catalog it instead of $135 million.
I noticed that you were doing the search in English and you were coming up with videos in other languages. Are the testimonies translated at all for the access to more viewers?
No, the testimonies are not translated at all for access to the other viewers. The question was, are they? And the answer is no. What we've done is, if the testimony was in Russian, they listen in Russian, and they index in English. So we have an index over all the testimonies in English, and then if someone wants to query in Russian, we just translate the keywords themselves for doing those queries, but we don't have any vehicle for them to listen in Russian and have it come out in English yet automatically. Except that we can say for each language, you know, even where we have something like Italian where we only have 400 interviews, that's still 1,200 hours of video, which is plenty for, let's say, an Italian school system to be able to build the same kind of programs we're doing for high schools in the United States. Yes, Mark.
Are you getting more information from the users? In other words, are there ways in which the people who use the collection can actually contribute to the collection and maybe even fact check some of the oral histories, or in any case provide additional information that can be part of the metadata?
Yeah, so the idea of using voluntary metadata, you know, input of metadata from volunteers, I think is what you're asking about. And we have a couple of issues there. One, you sort of get what you pay for, and you're not quite sure about the quality of it. The other is we tend to have a really rabid denier community across all of these different collections, and they're usually the first and the ones to cut and paste to put everything in there, and things get skewed. Not super quickly, but more quickly than you'd like. So we've been looking at ways to have an authenticated set of tags and then an unauthenticated set of tags, and we're playing with that. That's one of the areas that we're trying to figure out how that would be useful to researchers.
Other questions? Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.